What they didn't realize is that jury nullification actually has a tremendous lineage in America. It dates back to the Revolutionary period, to the colonial period, when American colonists were urged to participate in jury nullification against the tyranny of the English crown. And here too, I would suggest there's jury nullification work. What I mean by that is the facts are absolutely clear, right? So at the end, when Orestes is on trial for matricide, for killing his mother, there's just no question that he committed the act. Now, he presents an argument, not of self-defense, not an excuse. He presents rather an argument straightforwardly about justification, right? It's a very gendered argument, and that he was entitled to do this. So it's a plea, it's a request that even as a process is being created, here's the irony. In the first trial, there's an argument that's being made, but disregard the process, because the just outcome is, even though we have this process, understand there's this backstory, which technically isn't really part of this particular trial, but should be weighed and taken into account. So my second question for you is, do we desire closure too much? Do we want things to be too neat and tidy? Does drama perhaps mislead us, as trials mislead us, because they come to binary outcomes? Is someone guilty or are they innocent? Are they to be, in this case, put to death or set free? And there isn't any allowance for the ambiguity, for the gray, for the complexity, for everything that's just part of the lives that we ordinarily lead. Third and finally, I would ask this. Do we maybe have everything backwards? What I mean is, there's a quote, George Santayana, around the turn of the 19th century to the 20th, is credited for having said, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And this is we're reminded of all the time as we look at world events, whether it's global conflict or anything else. You know, he also said, only the dead have seen the end of war. But what I would ask is this. Maybe Santayana, as wonderful as that phrase is, maybe he has it backwards. Maybe those who cannot forget the past are condemned to repeat it. And what this trilogy shows is that because we can't travel back in time to fix the original sin, and even if we could travel back in time, we'd have to keep traveling back generation to generation to generation. So part of what must happen is somebody has to give in a way that is so difficult that any of us who could remember any of the sorts of crimes that are described here, fratricide and cannibalism and regicide, and all of the other types of killing, and within a family, any of us, male or female, in the past or today, would have some, one hopes, emotion about that. We couldn't help but seek vengeance. And so maybe those who can remember the past are condemned to repeat it. You know, there's a short story by the great Argentinian intellectual Jorge Luis Borges called Funes de Memorias. Some of you may know this one. It's famous stories written about half a century ago. And it's about a character who cannot forget. He remembers everything. And it's a curse. He can't lead any semblance of an ordinary life. He's just overwhelmed by all this data and all these emotions and all of the past. And he whiles away his time creating mental schematic typologies so he can try to categorize all the facts. So one of the things he does is he tries to remember everything that happened in a particular day. But it turns out to remember that everything that happened in a particular day takes another day itself to remember. So he's just stuck in this cycle. And it's a lovely story that captures how what we wish we had, right? My parents are now at a stage where they don't quite remember everything. anything, you can tell that they're going to be on sort of a downhill slope from here. But it hasn't actually saddened them. And maybe remembering too much causes a problem for us. So what happens here is, in the Oresteia, is we create a public process by which we can simultaneously remember and forget, right? We can decide as a society to start forgetting, to move on, to put things behind us. And it's an alternative to war, right? It's no accident that this trial takes place in a sort of a hill or outcropping dedicated to Ares, the god of war, right? So the idea is, in this very place where previously what had enshrined was military conflict, the Furies will turn kindly, they will be gentle, and they will find a peaceful home. Yet this redemption is incomplete. It's incomplete because, of course, this trilogy, as would be expected in the time, is quite clearly what we would call today sexist, right? There's a discussion which almost seems absurd that children don't come from their mothers because the mother is just like the soil and the seed comes from the father. It's difficult to think that they could have regarded it, even in the context of Greek tragedy then, that they would have watched that and listened to that argument with a straight face. And it's also what we would call now homophobic, right? There are assigned gender roles, and the couple that meets their demise, Clytemnestra, has a man's heart in a woman's body, right? There are repeated references, including phallic references to the blade and so on. While Aeschylus, right, is characterized as womanly in his behavior. I saw this staged in 2001, where Aeschylus was very deliberately played as quite fey. And so this is sexist, it's homophobic, it depends on divine intervention. Athena's clearly biased. Of course, the jurors are all male, but despite all that, this shows progress, right? Progress toward rule of law, progress toward this notion that ultimately these aren't just private disputes, even among kings and royal families, but they're very public disputes. They affect all of us, that we all have a stake in the outcome, and that how individuals of this status are dealt with ultimately reflects how others in a society and a democracy will be dealt with. So I leave you, I close on these three questions, and I invite dialogue. The first is, do we perhaps all, at least as theater goers, desire revenge, vengeance, a welling up of emotion that is beyond control? And in some way, is it not disappointing to think that reason will prevail? That is not the stuff of drama. Second, do we perhaps desire closure and neatness and narrative too much? The linearity, the formality, the schematic of Greek drama, to which we owe so much, but the way that it's staged, the rules, as it gives way in more recent time, especially in the work that is produced here at this theater, influenced by Dada and Surrealists, that reflects maybe a more realistic understanding of how the actual world around us works. Is that perhaps something else that we should aspire to in the theater? And third and finally, most provocatively, maybe we have it backwards. And this is perhaps what I would take away from the Oresteia as a subject to ponder in this time of terrorism and war, global conflict for us. Is it perhaps that, not that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, but that those who are obsessed with the past, those who cannot release the past, have an expiation of sins, of the generation of our fathers, grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers? Are we perhaps the ones who are condemned to repeat the past? And is there then here something that shows why the classics matter to not just lawyers and law students and law professors and deans, but to all of us. Is there something that we can learn here about how to lead our lives, our own individual lives, and the lives of the community that we're a part of, as we seek to ensure justice? Thank you.